Good morning. Today's daf is daf Lamed Vav in Masechet Chullin. We are at the on the second line of Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. Let me share my screen and we will get started. So yesterday we referenced the words from Bamidbar Perek Kaf Gimel Pasuk Kaf Daled, specifically the Dam Chalalim Yishteh, that the blood of the slain it drinks. This is part of Balaam's prophecy regarding the Jewish people. And according to Rabbi Shimon, from this verse, we learn that only the blood of slain animals can make food susceptible to tumah. Meaning that if you have, although blood, well, let's back up and just remind ourselves of the background rule, right? In order for a vegetable or a fruit to be subject to um, became capable of becoming tameh, it needs to have been in touch with one of seven different liquids. One of those liquids is water. That's the most common. But another one of the liquids that could result in a fruit or vegetable or any kind of grown thing or food product generally being capable of becoming tameh is blood. Now, I certainly, before I learned this Gemara, thought that, well, blood is blood. It doesn't make a difference what the nature is. But what we've seen is that it's a little bit more complicated than that. That the concept of blood being one of the seven liquids that can make something tameh is not a universal concept. And specifically, at least according to Rabbi Shimon, he learns that blood only can make things tameh if it's like one of the drinks. And so as a result, this pasuk from Bamidbar, Parakav Gimel, pasuk Kav Dalid, teaches that blood of a slain animal, and that's as opposed to, as we saw yesterday, Rabbi Shimon would distinguish this from the blood of an animal that is still alive, but has a wound in it, and he would distinguish it from an animal that died of natural causes, and potentially, at least according to the view that we saw yesterday, that who was it? This was the view of, my apologies. This was the view of Rav Asi. Rav Asi said that not only that, but even shechita blood would not be able to cause anything to be capable of becoming tameh. So that was what we saw yesterday. And now, as we pick up on the second line, third to last word on the line, we're going to get another view of what this verse teaches us. So Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael, the dam chalalim yishteh, the blood of the slain it drinks, prat ladam ki luach she'eno machsher es hazram. This is excluding any blood that effectively squirts out of the animal, because that is not going to cause it to be tameh, because that is, in fact, we can take a look. Second Rashi, second line down, Prat Ladam Kiluch, Shemekiz ez habehema betchila hadam shoches betipa achat, oshtayim, va'achar kach kihu mikaleach, va'achar kach hu mashkir. So basically, it goes through the different stages of the bleeding. And that's this is the detail that is says in Krisus, the Maseches Krisus, Daf Kaf Betam and Aleph. V'Tanya Hasam Ezu Dam Hekesh HaNefesh Yotza Bo Mitipa HaMishacheret VeElach Aval Dam Ki Luach Lo Havi Dam Nefesh. But this initial drop that squirts out, that is not considered the dam hanefesh, and so as a result, that blood is not going to, because effectively the animal is still alive, it's not slain, therefore it is not going to create cause anything, even fruits and vegetables to become capable of becoming tamei. Okay, so that alternative version of what we might learn from dam chalalim yishteh. Tana Rabbanan, hashochet vehitis dam al hadulas. If you engage in slaughter and then so some blood spatters onto the gourd, onto your vegetables. Rebbe Omer Huksher. Rebbe says that gourd is now capable of becoming tamei if somebody's tummy touches it. Rebbe Chia Omer Tolin. Rebbe Chia says no, we suspend it. So what do we mean by suspended? Well, we'll see in a moment, but let's take a look at some Rashis. So Vehitis, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down in Rashi, and it's probably worthwhile to keep your finger on Rashi as we go through the next piece of the Gemara. Vehitis B'tchila Shchita. We're talking about at the very beginning of the Shchita, the blood that spurts out. Al Hadalas Tulusha Shel Truma. We're talking about a gourd that was cut and is truma. So the cut aspect is because obviously until it's cut, it can't be capable of becoming tamei. Once it's cut, it can become capable of becoming tamei if some liquid goes on it. So if in fact the liquid goes on it, so then that would make it capable of becoming tamei according to Rebbe. But Rebbe Chia Omer Tolan. Rebbe Chia says that no, we suspend it. Rashi tells us, Likame mefarish my Tolan. What do we mean by Tolan? Well, that the Gemara is going to explain. Indeed, we're going to have two explanations of that in a moment. Rebbe Oshia. Rebbe Oshia says that, based on this debate, Me'achar Rebbe Omer Huksher, Rebbe Chia Omer Tolan, Anu al minismoch. On whom should we rely? It's a 1 versus 1. So Bo v'nismach al divrei Rebbe Shimon. We'll rely on the opinion that is more like Rebbe Shimon because that means that we end up with two views that are like him. Shahai Rebbe Shimon Omer, Shchita machsheres below dam. That again, according to Rebbe Asi, we saw that Shchita is what sanctifies and enables an animal to become capable of being tamei, and not its blood. And so, as Rashi says, Bo v'nismach al divrei Rebbe Shimon, shehu misayeya es Rebbe Chia. He's going to end up supporting Rebbe Chia. Rebbe Chia again is the one who says we have to suspend it, and now we're going to see what that means by suspended. But we're going to rely on him because we're going to try to interpret Rabbi Oshia's statement. We're going to give two interpretations for that statement in just a moment. And so through those two interpretations, we're going to give two interpretations also for Rabbi Chia's comment about Tolan. And so, but in either approach that we're going to take, we are going to note, like Rav Oshia says, that Rabbi Chia is supported by Rabbi Shimon. And how are they supported? Continuing on Rashi, Sha'amar ein dam maham aksher. Again, Rabbi Shimon says that blood does not cause an meat to become capable of becoming tamei, or anything to become capable of becoming tamei. V'havale Rebbe Yachid, and so as a result, Rebbe will be an individual b'mekom shnayim, compared with two alternative viewpoints that agree with one another in the form of Rebbe Shimon and Rebbe Chia. So that is the story, and now we're going to have two explanations of this machlokas and of Rav Oshia's statement. First by Rav Papa, and then by Rav Ashi. So let's take a look.
So what does it mean? The Gemara mean again when it says shchita machsheret. That's just cutting there's no blood. It's the animal that makes machsheret to cause something to become a tumor to make a tumor.
So if you remember from yesterday, we saw this concept of that something that is holy, just because it's holy, is considered mekudash, even though you did not actually have any liquid touch it. Similarly, the shchita itself provides a sense of significance to the item that you shechted, such that as a result, the meat is going to be considered capable of becoming tamei, even if it does not touch any blood or any liquid of the 7 liquids. That is the concept, and that is what that of course is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah, but that is not. Note that that is not the opinion of either Rebbe or Rabbi Chia. Both
So the
Rebbe
meat
and Rabbi
itself can cause something else to become
can cause
tummy.
the animal itself to become tamei, and as a result, and again, according to the way we saw Rabbi Asi teach Rabbi Shimon's opinion, according to Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Shimon would say that the blood does not have any ability. The blood that comes out as a result of shchita does not have any ability to make anything else tamei.
Right, but where does the meat? Doesn't the meat come from the shkita?
Yes, the meat comes from the shechita, and the shechita is enough to make the meat capable of becoming tamei.
Well, it seems like circular reasoning. The meat causes can make something become, and the shkita can also cause the meat to
No,
become
no, no, no.
tamei.
There is no circular reasoning. The meat doesn't do anything. The shechita makes the meat capable of becoming tamei.
Wow. But the meat comes from the shkita, right?
The
It,
the
it,
meat the meat you can only eat the meat because of the shechita.
right. I mean, there's no meat without shkita. There's no meat.
That's not true. You kill an animal, there's meat, just not for Jewish people, not for
Oh,
people who
okay,
are
okay.
observant.
But the point is the meat has to come from an animal. I mean, okay, shchita. But the point is without killing the animal, sacrificing the animal, whatever. I mean, there's no meat. So without shchita, that it has to be shchita in this case in order to generate the meat from the animal. That could be. We're not.
Yes, and that shechita gives the animal a sufficient level of importance that we say you do not need also to touch any liquid, according to Rabbi Shimon. That's not the opinion of the Tanakhama in our Mishnah, but it is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon.
So it's the act of the shchita or the product of the shchita.
The act of shechita makes, I mean, it's not completely clear, to be honest, right? So there's a debate among Rishonim as to exactly how to understand what Rabbi Shimon is saying. But the bottom line is that Rabbi Shimon says that because you did shechita on this animal, the meat of that animal is now capable of becoming tamei.
Oh, okay. So it's the meat of the animal. It's not the act of the shchita. I mean, I don't even know what that would. That's why
No,
I'm
no,
trying
I
to.
don't understand what you're saying.
That's what I mean. I'm reading this and I'm hearing this, and
No,
that's
the
that's
act of
what's confusing.
shchita, it is the act of shchita that makes the meat capable of becoming tamei. I don't know why you're saying the meat itself is making it capable of becoming tamei. It's the act of shchita that makes the meat capable of becoming tamei. If you take a gun and point it and shoot an animal and now it's dead, that meat needs to touch blood or some other liquid before it becomes capable of becoming tamei.
Okay. Okay.
Whereas if you do shchita on the animal, then it is capable of becoming tamei.
All right.
All right, there's a very big difference. It's specifically when we say shchita, we mean see you later. We mean slaughtering the animal through the ritual process
Right.
of
Right. Right.
shchita.
Right.
Okay. All right. So now that we have that as background, so we have now this machlokas between, again, we have effectively a three-way machlokas. According to Rebbe, the blood of shchita is totally capable of making things tamei. And so that's why if it goes onto a gourd, it's going to be capable of truma. It's going to be tamei truma, and you're going to need to get rid of it, and you're going to need to burn it. According to Rebbe Chia, he says that we suspend it. We're not really clear what that means by suspend it. We will see over the next few minutes, but that's opinion number two. And opinion number three of Rebbe Chia, I'm sorry, excuse me, opinion number three of Rebbe Shimon in our Mishnah is that the blood does nothing, as we saw Rav Ashi explain Rebbe Chia, I'm sorry, explain, excuse me, as we saw Rav Asi, excuse me, as we saw Rav Asi explain Rabbi Shimon yesterday, that according to Rabbi Shimon, according to Rav Asi, the blood of shchita does nothing. Okay, so we now have three opinions. We're going to try and figure out how they align as we go through this next Gemara. So we're at Amar of Papa. That is, where is it? Amar of Papa, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down towards the middle of the line. So Amar of Papa, Hakol modim hecha de isya ladam mitchila v'ad sof. Everybody agrees, meaning both Rebbe and Rebbe Chia agree that when the blood is on the gourd from the beginning of the shechita until the end of the shechita, Kule alma lo pligi demasher. Everybody will agree that in that situation that it does make the gourd capable of becoming tamei, meaning that both Rebbe and Rebbe Chia disagree with Rebbe Shimon and say blood from shechita is capable of making something else susceptible to tumah. Ki pligi, where is it that Rebbe Chia and Rebbe disagree? Bitnis kana hadam ben siman l'siman. If you haven't yet finished the shechita and you wipe the blood off of the gourd, then in that situation, is the gourd subject capable of becoming tamei or not? Rabbi Sabar Yeshna l'shchita mitchila vatsof. Rabbi says that the process of shchita begins when you begin the cut, and therefore this blood that came out before you finished even the first cutting of the first pipe, that is going to constitute shchita blood, and it's capable of making it the gourd tame, or capable of making the gourd susceptible to tuma, and therefore the gourd is susceptible to tuma, and that's what he said in the brisa that we started with. V'hai dam shchitahu. This is dam shchita, and so as a result, it's capable. It makes the gourd susceptible to tuma. Rabbi Chia sabar ein l'shchita ela b'sof. Rabbi Chia says, as we saw this machlokus earlier in the Masechet, that the question of what is the moment of shechita, the moment of shechita is not, according to Rabbi Chia, the entire process of doing the cutting, but rather the last moment of shechita. That is when we know it's shechita, and that is when only that then does the blood that came out constitute blood of shechita. Makahu. And so as a result, this blood that has come out and has now been wiped off before the process of doing the shechita was complete, that blood is not the blood of shechita, but rather it's the blood of a wound, and therefore not capable of making the gourd susceptible to tumah. Umay tolin. And so when Rabbi Chia says we have to suspend things, what does it mean? Tolin adavar ad gmar shchita. We have to wait to see what happens at the end of the shchita process. You can't just know what happens at one moment during the process of the shechita, but and not know what happens at the end, because Rabbi Chia focuses on the end of the act of shechita. If there's still blood on the gourd at the end of the process of shechita, which is considered, according to Rabbi Chia, the moment of shechita, well, now that blood has become blood of shechita, and therefore is capable of making something susceptible to tuma, and therefore the gourd will be susceptible to tuma. Ve'ilo, but if the blood is not there when you finish the shechita process, lo machshir, well then it wasn't there at the end. Therefore, that blood, when it was there, was only the blood of a wound, and was not yet the blood of shechita, and therefore the gourd is not susceptible to tuma. And so when we say that we're waiting to see what will happen by the end of the shechita process. So umay bo v'nismoch al divrei Rabbi Shimon, and when Rabbi Oshia says, hey, we have to, let's figure out who we're going to paskin like by relying on Rabbi Shimon, what do we mean? Le Rabbi Shimon lo machshir. Of course, Rabbi Shimon says that blood can never make anything susceptible to tumah. Le Rabbi Chia mashir. And of course, Rabbi disagrees. He does say that blood can make food susceptible to tumah. So how do we understand that? Beniskanach mihu ashvula dadi. Well, they are still comparable to one another if the blood gets wiped away before the shechita finishes. Marlo machshir, umarlo machshir. They agree that in that case, even though they disagree about the blood itself, and for Rabbi Shimon, the blood can never make something susceptible to tumah. And Rabbi Chia says, as long as the blood is actually blood of shechita, it can. But in the case of blood that came from the beginning of the shechita process, and not the last moment, which is the only moment that matters, according to Rabbi Chia, we will say that then both Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon agree that that blood is not capable of making something susceptible to tuma. And so as a result, you have the two of them agree, and they disagree with Rebbe, who is a one-person opinion. And so as a result, that's why we're going to paskin like the combination of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Chia, even though they have different rationales for why they get there. According to Rabbi Chia, the blood that came from the early part of the shechita is just not blood shechita, and that's why it doesn't make anything susceptible to tuma. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says even if it were blood of the shechita, it wouldn't make anything susceptible to tuma. So they disagree on that fundamental fact, but they agree that in this case of blood that came on and then got wiped off before the shechita was finished, it's not capable of becoming tamei, and therefore they would disagree with Rebbe, and it's 2 against 1, and so we would follow them based on what Rebbe Oshia said.
Didn't we say at one point that the blood is supposed to be liquid?
Yes, we're talking about liquid blood the entire
time.
So
suppose this at the beginning of the shechita, the blood spills on this gourd, and by the time he finishes shechita, that blood is now dry. It's not liquid anymore. So if he wipes it, does it then matter whether he wipes it off or not wipe it off?
That is a very interesting question. It's not completely clear whether and I'll enhance your question because I don't. The answer is I don't know the answer to your question, because remember that we saw that it is possible that if you use a non-sharp enough knife, you could effectively engage in shechita from morning to night, and your shechita would still be kosher. So ordinarily, I would tell you that is not a real relevant question, because you can do the shechita takes a few seconds. It takes obviously a lot longer than a few seconds for blood to congeal in that manner. In fact, it takes under a few seconds to perform shechita ordinarily. But your question is a good one, because we saw that technically, as long as you are continuously engaged in the shechita, it can take a much longer time. And so actually, your question is a fabulous one, and I don't know the answer. Whether when we say that blood is capable of making something susceptible to tuma, presumably it needs to be liquid, and therefore this would be essentially another machlokas between Rebbe Chia and Rebbe Shimon and Rebbe. Of course, Rebbe says that as soon as the blood got on the fruit, it would be clear. That it would be capable of becoming tamei. And according to Rabbi Shimon, it doesn't make a difference because the blood is never capable of becoming tamei. So the situation where your question really applies is to Rabbi Chia, who says that the blood that initially gets on it is considered not blood of a makah, but if it's still there at the end, is it when the shechita is complete? Now it becomes blood of shechita. And so the question that you're asking is effectively, do we go retroactively or not? Now, based on what we've said so far, I would suggest that at least according to our first answer, that first explanation, again, the first explanation of Rav Papa would be that he would say that no, if it congealed, it's like it's not there any longer because it's like it got wiped away. Now, not 100% sure of that, but that would be my sense of the situation according to Rebbe Chia, because he requires the blood to still be there. So it's not as if because remember, if you wipe it away, even though now retroactively that blood that was there was blood of shechita, because in the end the shechita did happen, what's there now is nothing. And so similarly, if you had the blood being there and now it congealed by the time you finish the shechita, I would suggest that maybe the blood that's there is nothing. Not 100% sure, but that would be my sense of the issue. But it's really an excellent question. And I certainly did not see anybody that addressed it. And let's see whether what it would say if following Rav Ashi's approach. So Rav Ashi Amar, now approach number 2, a different meaning to suspend. Chullin la'olam mashma. He disagrees. It doesn't mean, when we say suspend, we don't mean that we suspend just for a few moments until the end of the shechita. Chullin suggests that we suspend it forever, that we are never going to know. And so what does that mean? V'niskanach l'Rabbi Chia sapuke masapka lay. According to Rabbi Chia, he's unsure about the situation about where something was wiped away. Whether he's not sure whether do we hold like Rebbe holds that shchita happens from the beginning to the end, and therefore the blood that got on this gourd is blood of shchita, and therefore the gourd is susceptible to becoming tamei. Or do we say that no, the moment of shchita is just the very end, and therefore you have to follow only whether it's blood at the very end. So umay tolin, lo ochlin, below sorfin. You don't eat it and you don't burn it. Now, based on Rav Ashi, the answer to your question is that Rabbi Chia would not change his opinion. He would say that in that situation also you would be presumably tolin. Lo ochlin, below sorfin. You can't burn it and you can't eat it. Because remember, the only time you're allowed to burn truma is if it's definitively tamei. Whereas if you're not sure whether it's tamei, you can't do anything with it. You can't eat it and you can't burn it. And so that's the way Rav Ashi understands the machlokes. Again, the positions of Rabbi Shimon and uh, and uh, and Rebbe are fixed. What we're changing here is only our understanding of Rebbe Chia. And now we have to explain what Rebbe Oshia meant, if this is our understanding of Rebbe Chia. Umay bo v'nismach al divrei Rebbe Shimon. What does Rebbe Oshia mean when he says that? Oshia mean when he says that? So he means the following. Rebbe, again, and it's asking the same question. L'Rebbe Shimon lo machsher, l'Rebbe Chia sfeika. So look, they disagree. How can you say that Rebbe Shimon is coming to support one of Rebbe or Rebbe Chia because they disagree? So yes, it's true that they disagree, but le'inyan sreifa miu shavula adadi. But they agree that when it comes to burning, they agree that you can't do it. Marlo sarfe, umarlo sarfe. Both Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon would agree that the gourd cannot be burned. And Rebbe, though, he says that you would burn it because it's capable of becoming tamei. And so as a result, if somebody tamei touches it, in that situation, you would need to burn that gourd. Whereas Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon, because Rabbi Chia is uncertain, and Rabbi Shimon says most definitely it is not capable of becoming tamei, they would say you can't burn it. So Havile Rebbe Chad ve'ein dvarav shel echad b'makom shnayim. And so as a result, even though Rebbe Chia and Rebbe Shimon have different rationales for saying that you cannot burn this gourd, we would say that they agree that you cannot burn it, and therefore you would not burn it, even though Rebbe disagrees and says that you do burn it, because two people win against one. V'haki kamar, and this is what we mean to say when kegon zos, like this case where the blood fell on the truma and was wiped away, Tolan. That's the situation where we have to leave things hanging, lo ochlen, velo sorfin. What we mean by hanging is we suspend things, you don't eat it, and you don't burn it.
What do they do with it? Can they bury it or not?
Yeah. I think you just leave it to rot, and then you maybe you could use it as compost, but not when I say that I don't think you can use it as compost intentionally. That would be still benefiting from it. This is what we do, right? With I wonder whether it's the analogy is not perfect. But in a Shemitah year, right, that you have to be careful about what you do with your esrog at the end of Sukkot. And so you just leave it. You're not allowed to, certainly not allowed to eat it. But there's no prohibition of burning. So I don't think that's relevant. But in any event, the bottom line is that you just leave it to the side and you let it rot, and then you put it out with presumably you can put it into the ashba, put it into the trash.
Well, there's a time of bior with Shemitah. To the products, you can make them hefker, right?
Well, yes, but I don't think you want to make this hefker because you can't eat. Nobody can eat it. You have to be careful about what making somebody else think that they're allowed to eat it. This is tamei truma, so the answer is nothing can happen to it. All right.
No, I'm talking about the Shemitah.
Yeah. Shemitah is different. Shemitah is different. Okay, so boy, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. So now the Gemara raises another issue in connection with whether things are susceptible to becoming tamei. So Rabbi Shlakish asked the following: Sarid shel menachos. If you have a dry part of menachos, monin bo rishon v'sheni, do we attribute to it the concept of a tumas rishon and sheni, meaning that it's capable of making something else tamei? Oh, ain monin bo rishon v'sheni, or do we not? As Rashi tells us, tsarid shel menachos. We'll take a look. This is Rashi 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 30, 40, 50, 60, 17 lines up. Tsarid shel menachos. Korte kemach hatzabur. You have a small amount of flour that is piled up b'mincha in the mincha ve'ein shemen nichnas l'tocha, and no oil got inside it, because oil, of course, is one of the things that makes something capable of becoming tamei. And so now you have this kodesh mincha that never touched oil, that piece of it that never touched oil. And then Rashi continues, Tzarid Lashon Yavesh, V'dugma Soba, Rosh Hashanah, Haya Kolo Dak, O Ava O Tzarud. That Tzarid just means dry, and so you can have a voice that sounds a little dry, maybe it means raspy, but in any event, that is Rashi number one. Skip the next Rashi, we'll go down to Monin Bo Rishon Sheni, Klomar, Im Nitma, if it becomes Tamei, Mitma Acherim Olo, do we allow this lump, this dry piece of mincha? Now, certainly we're going to say that it is capable of becoming tamei because it is kodesh, and we say that kodesh is by the virtue of chibas hakodesh, because we have this affection and love and respect for holy things. It makes it susceptible to tuma by itself. It doesn't need to even touch anything. But when we say that, when we say that the holiness allows it to become capable of becoming tamei, lemimna be rishon v'sheni lo, dilma loshna. Do we say that, but it doesn't allow us to count it as a rishon and sheni, and therefore make something else capable of becoming tamei? Meaning, if it gets touched by a rishon, it's now a sheni that is capable of making a shlishi, or if it gets touched by an avatuma, it now is a rishon latuma and capable of making something a sheni, etc. Odilma loshna, or do we say no? Or do we say no, that it's not capable of doing that, and it's only going to be puzzle itself? So Amar Rabbi Elazar. So we're going to offer several efforts to try and to do this. So first, we're going to offer Rabbi Elazar's answer, and then we're going to try to understand what Rabbi Elazar is saying. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Tashma mikol ha'ochal asher ye'achel. That look, the Torah says that when it describes the rule in Vayikra Perek Yud Aleph Pasuk Lamed Dalid, which says mikol ha'ochel asher ye'achel, from all food that is eaten, asher yavo alav mayim, that has water touch it, yitma, it can become tamei. V'kol mashka asher yishteh b'chol kli yitma, and any kind of liquid has the ability of becoming tamei. So that's the pasuk that tells us that you need to have liquid come on food in order for it to become capable of becoming tamei. So ochel haba b'bayim hokshar. So when it comes to food, it needs to touch water in order for it to become tamei. Ochel she'ein ba b'mayim, but something that does not touch water, lo hokshar. And so as a result, even though chibas hakodesh allows it to become tamei and therefore invalid, it will not allow it to make something else tamei because it's not a full-fledged tuma. Doesn't that answer our question? Doesn't that answer Reish Lakish? So Atu Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Leislei, Ochel Hababa Mayim. But 1 second, that answer seems too simple. Why would Reish Lakish think that this was a question? Of course, you need that. He agrees with the nature of the pasuk of Mikol HaOchel, that it needs to touch water. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Hachi Kami Baile. Here's what he was asking. He was asking a slightly more complicated question. Chibas HaKodesh Ka'ochel Hababa Mayim Dame Olo. Do we treat our affection for Kodesh, our respect for Kodesh, like it became like something that got came in contact with water or not? Do we not treat it like water? Something that came into contact with water. So Rabbi Elazar Nami, but you know what? We can show that Rabbi Elazar's answer is also intended to be on a more deep level. It's not just based on the verse. Miyaturi Kroi Kamer. He's focusing on the extra word in that verse because that verse michti ksiv v'chiyutan mayim al zera. We already have the verse in Perek Yud Aleph Pasuk Lamed Chet that when you have water on a seed that and then it's going to be capable of making other things tamei. So we already have that verse. So what do we learn? Why do we need effectively two verses that tell us that something that becomes in contact with water is capable of becoming tamei? Lav l'meute chibas hakodesh. Isn't it coming to exclude chibas hakodesh, something that is holy, and our concern for it and our affection for it makes it so that we need to that even though we treat it as capable of becoming tamei, we don't allow that tuma to then be passed on to anything else. Lo, no, not necessarily. Maybe we do allow its tuma to pass on to something else. And I'll tell you why we have two verses that tell us about liquid needing to touch something in order to make it capable of becoming tamei. Chad b'tumas meis. One is telling us about the tuma of a corpse. V'chad b'tumas sheretz. And one is telling us about the tuma of a creepy crawly thing. And we utzrichi, and we need to learn both of them. Because we're going to see that there are strict aspects of both the tumas mace and tumas sheretz, and therefore learning one would not necessarily tell us the other. Tumas mace, because if I told you just about the fact that tumas mace can only be conveyed to something edible if it touches water, hasamhu debai hechsher. Well, only in that case does it require some preparation. Bishum delomitamic b'kadasha, because tumas mace does not apply to the size of a lentil. That is a very small size, and that will not make something that cannot make something else tamei. Aval sheretz. But when it comes to a creepy crawly thing, it can make something tamei even in that small size. Maybe that the tuma of a sheretz doesn't need any kind of liquid preparation in order to convey the tuma because it applies even in very small, minute amounts. The iyash me'in and sheretz, and if I just taught about the sheretz, well, mishum dolomatami tuma shiva. That's not the kind of tuma that causes you to have to go through the para aduma process that lasts 7 days. Rather, you just go to the mikvah and you become tahor that night. Aval mace to metame tuma shiva. But when it comes to a corpse that causes tuma that lasts 7 days as part of the paraduma process, amaloli boy heksher. Maybe the tumas mace won't require us to have any kind of liquid touch the item in order for it to be able to become capable of becoming tamei through a tumas mace. So as a result, tzricha, that's why we need both, and therefore we cannot use this pasuk to tell us that in what the law is with respect to chibas hakodesh. Do we treat chibas hakodesh as fully tamei, or if it becomes tamei, or do we say no? Chibas hakodesh only allows it to become pasul; it does not allow it to become fully tamei, meaning it cannot cause tuma to be conveyed to other things. So we are now going to challenge. We are now going to challenge a number of efforts to try and figure out whether or not we can figure out what the view is. So Massive Rav Yosef.
So the sheretz itself doesn't cause tuma, can transfer whatever, unless the other object is wet, moist in some manner.
Say that one more time.
I'm just thinking. Does a sheretz by itself cause something else to be tamei, or does that something need to be
well, it depends what it is. The rule of needing to be a maksher lekabel tuma, some kind of a hechsher lekabel tuma, is only for food. So if you touch the sheretz, you will become tamei. But if your food touches the sheretz, well, then the question is, did that food touch water in a way that makes it capable of becoming tameh? That's the question. That's the question. So,
Okay.
so
I
that
thought if a person touches the sheretz, he can become tamei.
yeah, you're absolutely right. That's what I just said.
Right.
Okay, so that is absolutely correct. The only thing that needs to touch water or that we're talking about is food. All the time that we're talking about hechsher l'kabel that's why we talk about a gourd. Gourd is like
Right.
not a legume, a squash, right? So that those kind of produce. That's why we're talking about that kind of produce because we're
It's
talking about
just produce. If the sheretz crawls on the side of the building, let's say the building cannot become tuma and tame.
well, the building can't become exactly. The building's not capable of becoming
Right.
tamei. So you could
Right.
throw as much water on the building as you want. It's not going to be capable of becoming tamei. Okay, so now if that building was a metal shed that is
Metal. Metal.
movable a metal shed, then that would be different.
Right.
But in any event, I'm assuming that you meant the building attached to the ground. Okay, so even though we have now shown that Rebbe Lazar's proof is not right, we are going to challenge Rebbe Lazar's conclusion. So although the Gemara rejected Rebbe Lazar's proof from the verse, Rebbe Lazar himself is still going to hold that verse shows that only liquid can render food susceptible to full-fledged tuma, and just chibas hakodesh will not allow that food to make other things tameh. So the answer to Reish Lakish's question is that piece of mincha that never touched oil, it can become tameh and therefore invalid to put on the mizbeach, or invalid to eat if you're a kohen, that you're supposed to the kohanim that get the mincha that's left over, the shirayim. But but it will not make anything else. If it touches something else, it will not make that other thing tameh according to Rabbi Elazar. So now we're going to ask on Rabbi Elazar's view. So Masav Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says, 1 second. Our Mishnah says, Rabbi Shimon Omer Huksharu B'Shchita. That when we say in our Mishnah that something can become capable of becoming, that the meat is capable of becoming tamei as a result of the shchita, and therefore who cares whether any blood actually touches it? Doesn't this imply that it implies that not only it becomes hukshar, it becomes a hukshar so that it is actually tamei, meaning that it's a tuma that actually can be conveyed to something else. It's a rishon or a sheni that can be conveyed to something else and make something a sheni or a shlishi. So amai. But according to you, Rabbi Lazar, who says that it needs to touch water or some liquid, why would it be capable of making something else tamei? So Amrle Abaye says, Asuhu behachshar mayim midrabanan. No, when Rabbi Shimon is saying that it's capable of becoming tamei and making other things tamei, he's saying that tuma is only a rabbinic tuma. It is not a biblical tuma. It's just like, and the rabbis say that it's just like chibas hakodesh is just like something touched water as rabbinically, but biblically that is what Reish Lakish is asking about, and therefore, and therefore, Rav Yosef can still hold his opinion and not have his answer be that it is not capable, and it still be consistent with our Mishnah. Rabbi Zera. So now Rabbi Zera tries another proof. Tashma habotzer legas. If you pick grapes. Shammai Omer Huksh, and now you put them and you pick them in order to put them in a press, and now you put the grape into a basket, and the basket has the juice from the grapes is going to seep out. If you've ever gotten a big basket of grapes, the bottom grapes get smushed a little bit and have some grape juice come out, but the basket has holes in it, so the juice runs out, and so as a result, the owner does not want that to happen, and so therefore technically, from a liquid perspective, again, in order for a liquid to make something capable of becoming tameh, you have to want that liquid to be there. But here you don't want that juice to be there because you'd prefer the juice to wait to be squeezed out until it goes into the press. But Shammai Omer Huksher. Shammai says that nonetheless it is capable of becoming tameh, and he says that because as Rashi tells us, Shammai Omer Hoksher, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down in Rashi on Lamed Vav Amud Bet. He says, even though the owner of this basket was not happy that the grapes let out liquid hayotze mehem that came out of the grapes, because it all gets lost. Gazrinan, we have a gzera, gzrinan la b'yitzias Shabbos, b'yitzias Shabbos, that we have in the chapter, the first chapter of Shabbos about Yitzias Shabbos, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, Shema yibatzranu bekupot mezufot, that because maybe you'll end up picking the grapes and putting them in a pitched basket, which will hold on to the grape juice. Not sure I would want the grape juice that comes out of that, but in any event, that would hold on to the grape juice. And as a result, you are okay with the grape juice coming out, and therefore the grapes would become capable of becoming tameh in that situation. Because that's a possibility, we want to make a low plug and say that similarly, even when you use a basket that has holes in the bottom and the grape juice all pours out, we're going to also treat it as capable of becoming tameh. So that's Shammai's position. Hillel Omer Lo Hilchsher. Hillel disagrees and says it's not capable of becoming tameh. But Vishasakle Hillel LaShammai. But in the later conversation, Hillel was quiet to Shammai, indicating that he agreed with Shammai. Now, Amai, what according to Rebbe Lazar, who says that nothing of this should be capable of making anything else tameh, why are we worried about this? V'hailav ochel haba b'mayimhu. This is not a case of food that came into contact with water. This liquid was not what we wanted, and therefore it would not create a problem. So again, Amar le Abaye asuhu behekshar mayim bin rabbanan. We're talking about where the rabbis decreed this. This was not a biblical understanding; it was a rabbinic understanding, and that's why this is not going to be relevant to our conversation. Okay, and so now Amar le Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef responds to Abaye. Aminalach ana huksharu b'shchita. I talked about our Mishnah's ruling of Rabbi Shimon. But amratli asu kachshar mayim. You said, well, the rabbis made it like it was touching water. V'amarlach Rabbi Zera, and Rabbi Zera gave a proof. V'amartli asu kachshar mayim, and you gave the same answer to him. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish nami asu kachshar mayim. So let's give that same answer to Reish Lakish, meaning that Reish Lakish asked the question about some dry mincha. If it became tameh, can it make other things tameh? So let's say the answer is that the rabbis treat it like it contacted with water, and therefore it's capable of making other things tameh. So that should answer Reish Lakish's question. So Amar le Abaye responds, no, it doesn't answer Abaye's question. Atu Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish litlos kamibayle. He's asking about the nature of the tuma. Is it tuma that is only rabbinic, and therefore we have to suspend what we do with it? We cannot burn it and we cannot eat it, but we just have to leave it lying around. Ki kamibayle lisro. What he's asking about is, can you burn it? The point is that Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish agrees with what I'm saying. He would agree that the rabbis would say, in the case of the dry mincha, that in fact it rabbinically will make other things tameh and therefore invalid. But can you burn it if it's truma? If it made it into a rishon or a sheni, and now that dry mincha offering touches truma, and so therefore, if it were biblically a sheni, then it would make the truma a shlishi and make the truma invalid, and the truma would need to get burned. But if in fact it's biblically only pasul, and it's only rabbinically that we're treating it as a sheni, well then now all of a sudden this truma that touched it, yes, nobody can eat it. That is true, but nobody can burn it either because it's not biblically tameh. And so that is the question that was asked, and we did not answer that question. So, but the implication of all this is miklal dechibas hakodesh doraisa. The implication is that Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish is saying that this idea of chibas hakodesh is biblical. So, minalan, how do we know that that is the case? How do we know that in fact that is true? So,
we just say that it was not biblical, that it was a sheni rabbanim?
No. So again, what is not biblical is its ability to make other things tameh. The ability of that dry mincha to become tameh and invalid itself, that is what Reish Lakish is saying is biblical. The question is, can it make other things tameh? And he agrees that rabbinically it can make other things tameh. And what Reish Lakish is asking is, biblically, can it make other things tameh? And again, Rabbi Elazar answers that the answer is no. But Reish Lakish's question is about, can it make other things tameh biblically? And so,
but why is it not pasul at a sheni? If the sheni was mid the rabbanan, why isn't it a pasul at that point? It cannot make other things tameh.
No. Everybody's agreeing that it is at least pasul. The question, remember, it is being touched by a av or a rishon. And so if it was touched by an av or a rishon, and this is a mincha, so the mincha could even be a shlishi, and it would not be pasul, right? The question is, can this mincha offering now make other things tameh? Everybody agrees that biblically, and it's implied by Reish Lakish's question, that biblically this mincha will need to be burned outside the Beis Hamikdash because it became tameh. That everybody is agreeing to.
It became tameh from a rishon?
It became tameh from a rishon or a sheni. Frankly, it could even be a shlishi, but then the question isn't relevant, because if it was tummy from a shlishi, then it can't make anything else tummy because it's a ravi, right. And a ravi is psul by kodesh. So we're talking about where it was touched by a rishon, an av, a rishon, or a sheni. And the question is can it make, and we're really talking about when it was touched by an av or a rishon, because our question is about whether or not the truma that it touches requires burning. That's the question. That's the question that we're really asking. Does the truma that it touches, that this dry mincha touch, is that capable, is that truma that it touches now require burning?
But that truma is a shlishi now, right?
The truma would be a shlishi and therefore be a psul. And
psul. So it cannot transfer truma to anything else.
No, but we're not asking about the truma. We're asking about the mincha. The question that Reish Lakish is asking is about the dry mincha. And we're not talking about the truma.
So the mincha is a sheni?
The mincha is either a rishon or a sheni, correct?
Uh-huh.
All right? That was the question. The question is a mincha that becomes a rishon or a sheni, and now it touches the truma. Does it convey the truma to the truma? That's the question. And everybody agrees to the following. Everybody agrees that the mincha itself must be burned, because the mincha has chibas hakodesh and therefore is capable of at least becoming invalidated biblically, and therefore will need to get burned outside the Beis Hamikdash. And everybody agrees that when this mincha that never touched any liquid touches truma, which did touch a liquid, and now conveys the truma to the liquid, that rabbinically this truma cannot be eaten by a kohen. What Reish Lakish is asking about, and what Rabbi Elazar answers and says the answer is no, is does biblically the mincha, dry mincha, that never touched any liquid and therefore is not biblically tameh, but only has a chibas hakodesh kind of tuma on it, is that the same biblically as if it had touched liquid and therefore is fully tameh and therefore capable of making the truma fully tameh or invalid and therefore biblically requiring burning? Or is it only a rabbinic and therefore nothing happens? And what Rabbi Elazar says back is it's only rabbinic, nothing else happens to this truma, and truma can't be eaten, but it's just going to have to be left. Okay? But the implication of this is that the mincha itself, miklal dechibas hakodesh deoraisa, the mincha itself must be burned outside the Beis Hamikdash, because the only way that this mincha could convey a tuma of deoraisa to something else is if the chibas hakodesh itself concept was deoraisa. So minalan, the Gemara wants to know, and
Now,
so
the Chivat HaKodesh is not referring to Kodshe Kodshim here, is it?
it could be. I mean, mincha isn't mincha kache kachim? Yeah, mincha's kache kachim.
So we're talking about something that is Kodesh, right?
Yes, yes, that's the mincha. We're talking about mincha. Absolutely, we're talking about a mincha. All right, so miklal dechiba is a kodesh deoraisa. So let's finish it up. Minolan. So how do I know? So well, maybe you could say it's from the pasuk in Vayikra Parak Zayin pasuk Yutet that the meat that touches anything that is tamei is not going to be eaten and it's going to be burned in the fire. And so that doesn't imply necessarily that any blood touched this meat, that any liquid touched this meat. And so maybe that's what we're going to say. And so it shows that it doesn't make a difference whether any blood touched it. It's capable of becoming tamei, but not necessarily. Hi, basar is kasher b'mai. Now, how did that meat become capable of becoming tamei? If you tell me that it touched blood, well, the blood of the animals that are in the Beis Hamikdash, they don't have the ability to make things susceptible to tuma, because Shneamar lo tochlenu al haaretz shpechenu kamayim. When it says that you cannot eat the blood, you have to spill it to the water like ground. That is what dama nishbach kamayim machshir. It's only blood that needs to be spilled to the ground and is like water that is considered capable of making something susceptible to tuma. But she'enu nishbach kamayim. But if it is not required pouring to the ground, and in specifically the blood in the Beis Hamikdash needs to be caught, and therefore is not like that at all, and therefore enu machshir. Therefore, that blood, which is on some level from a sanctified animal that is from some kind of korban, is not capable of making things tamei. So it can't be talking about touching blood. So now, how else could it become tamei? Capable of becoming tamei? Well, maybe after you do the slaughtering, the meat that the kohanim are going to eat are all processed and washed, and maybe, or actually even in the sacrificial meat is all washed, and so maybe the water that's used to wash that meat makes it capable of becoming tamei. No, that doesn't work either, because Vaha Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Chanina, said, "Mashke beis mitukaya," that when it comes to the liquids of the butchering place, lo dayan shehein dechan ella she'ein machshirin. That it's not only are they considered tahor, but they don't even make food susceptible to becoming tamei either. That is, they are not. It's not like regular water. And so, as a result, if somebody asks you, "Is all water capable of making something capable of becoming susceptible to tuma?" the answer is no. The water in the butchering place is not. Adam. Maybe when we say call that mashke basement b'chaya lo dayan she'en dachan ela she'en da machshirin. That when you say that the liquids in the butchering place don't make things susceptible to tuma, maybe it's referring to the blood, and it's really just the same law that Rabbi Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. So no, that can't be, because v'hamashke kamer, he said liquids. And so the only liquids in that butchering place are water and blood. So it must refer to the water. Okay, elalav. So as a result, what must be the situation? The is kasher b'chibas hakodesh. The preparation, what made the meat capable of becoming tamei, is the fact that it was chibas hakodesh, that we have this love and affection and respect for the holy sacrifices, and therefore that's why it's susceptible to tuma. And so as a result, we see that this is a biblical requirement, that is something that meat from a korban is susceptible to tuma just by the nature of it being kodesh. No, not necessarily. The Duma Kid Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, maybe it's like Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Kigon shahaisa lo para shel zivche shlamim vehevira benachal. Maybe it's like a situation where you have a cow that is going to be a shlamim, and on your walk to Yerushalayim, it passes through a river. And now shchita, you did the shchita for it in the Beis Hamikdash, v'adayin mashke tofech aleha, and there was still some wetness on the animal, and that is why the animal is capable of becoming tamei, because you purposefully brought the animal through the river, because that was part of getting you to the Beis Hamikdash. So you want the water to be on the animal. You wanted the animal to get wet, and now it's still wet with that water. And so as a result, that water is going to make it capable of becoming tamei. So you do not have a definitive proof from the fact that the Torah says that meat from sacrifices is capable of becoming tamei. That fact alone is not enough. Elam is seifa. Rather, we learn it from the continuation of that verse, because the verse continues, v'habasar. It says, and the meat. So take a look. Let's look at give the whole pasuk. V'habasar asher yiga b'chol tamei. That any meat that touches anything that is tamei, lo yeachel, you shall not be eaten. This is referring to sacrifices. Be'esh yisaref, it shall be burned. V'habasar, and the meat, kol tahor yochal habasar. Only the people who are tahor can eat the meat. Now, why does the pasuk say the word vahabasar? That vahabasar is totally unnecessary. It could have just said vahabasar sher yigab b'chol tamei lo yeachel be'esh yisarev kol tahor yochal basar. It didn't need to say that word. The extra word larabos Eitzim v'lavona. What is that coming to teach us? It's coming to teach us that the tuma that this pasuk is talking about also includes wood and lavona. Well, Eitzim u'lavona b'nei achila linhu, are wood and incense, the frankincense, are they the lavona? Are they capable of being eaten? Elachibas hakodesh machshara lahu u'mishav hu ochel. Rather, it is because of the respect that we have for the wood and for the lavona that we treat them like food and capable of becoming tamei. And so hakanami chibas hakodesh mechasharta. So similarly, when it comes to the meat, we treat it as capable of becoming tamei. So what is the status of the meat or anything that is chibas hakodesh and becomes tamei? Ki mahanya chibas hakodesh lepsulik degufe. Do we say that it makes the item itself pasul, and therefore, but it does not allow that tuma to be conveyed any further? Odilma loshna, or do we say no, it makes no difference, and we treat it as fully tamei? And the answer is teku. We're going to have to wait for Eliyahu Hanavi to come and tell us whether or not chibas hakodesh is considered fully tamei, or is it just a psul? This brings us to the next Mishnah, which considers shchita of an animal that is close to death. But for that Mishnah and the discussion of what is meant by close to death, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
But this meat is not tamei, though, is it? The question is, perhaps is chuksher to be makabel tuma, but it's not tamei. This meat that is shechted we're talking about this meat, and it's with the wood and so forth. It's not tamei.
Let's be. You're absolutely right. When we say chibas hakodesh, what we say is that the chibas hakodesh means every sacrifice and all wood and all lavona is capable of becoming tamei, to be invalidated just by virtue of its holiness. You don't need it to touch any water. You don't need to do anything else. And the question is, if it does become tamei, does it have the ability to convey that tuma elsewhere? And that is what the teku is on. The teku is on whether, if it becomes tamei, does that have the ability to convey to something else?
How could it become tamei? Someone touches it who's tamei?
Yes. Lots of 100. There are a myriad of ways that is,
right.
Somebody walks into the Beis Hamikdash, doesn't realize that they walked over a tuma, over a grave, and then they touch the thing, and then somebody comes and says, "You walked over that spot. That's where somebody is buried. You're tamei. You have to leave the Beis Hamikdash right away." No, he didn't. He didn't do it on purpose. But the things that he touched are tamei. Now the question is how far do we go with that? Do we say that the thing that he touched that he touches somebody's sacrifice, and now that sacrifice doesn't get burned, it has to get fully burned. Well, what if that sacrifice now touched somebody else's sacrifice? Do we say that thing conveyed the tuma to the other sacrifice or not? So that's exactly our question. So that's the rabbinically we'll say everything that it touched it becomes tamei, and so absolutely we're going to say that you're not allowed to offer any of the sacrifices that sacrifice touched, assuming that we'll have to ignoring for the moment that there's no dry to dry transfer of tuma. But in any event, when it comes to food, but the point is that yes, that's exactly right. The question is only is assuming that the thing that was hechsher lekabel tuma now actually does become tamei, and we're dealing with something that is chibas hakodesh and not actually something that touched a liquid. Does that have the ability to convey tuma biblically to something else? And that is where we leave it as take.
But this piece of meat that was after the animal was nishchat, I guess that didn't come in contact when
if it doesn't get in contact
with any liquid.
Yes, it did not come in contact with any liquid, and it did not come in contact. And if it does not come in contact with any tuma, then although it is hoksher lekabel tuma, it's not tamei, and you burn it on the altar.
Well, depending on what it is, it could be eaten too. Part of it.
Yeah, 100%. It gets
right.
Offered as a sacrifice. The sacrifice gets completed 100%.
But it doesn't need to be. Doesn't need to come in contact with liquid. That's what we're saying here too, right?
Well, we're asking, does it? If it comes in contact with a liquid, then it will become capable of becoming tamei biblically and be able to convey tuma to other things. Our presumption of the question is that it did not come in contact with liquid, because that is the interesting question, because that allows us to ask, does chibas hakodesh, does tuma of something that was only chibas hakodesh hoksher, only hoksher as a result of it being chibas hakodesh, does that allow it to be conveyed? We all know that if it touches a liquid, that now that same, again, if we go to that mincha offering, and that mincha was very well mixed, and so all the oil touched all the grains of the flour, and now that flour became the oil flour mixture becomes tamei. Everybody agrees that is tuma de oraisa that could be conveyed to something else. And now if your truma touches it, everybody will agree that truma is going to be tamei and needs to be burned. The only time that we have this question is when there's no liquid involved, and the only reason that the thing is capable of becoming tamei, the holy thing is capable of becoming a tamei, is because it's holy. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Now, I have another question. We talked earlier about the concept of the idea that water or liquid, whatever, that there are 7 liquids, they touch the subject.
The object, food. It's got to be food.
The food object.
Yep.
So
now it's capable of coming. Now, of course, you also have to want it. You have to also want it to touch.
However, but we said that a person has to have intent to want that liquid, right? So
there are multiple levels of that.
So if a person, let's say so now let's say, so going back to a previous discussion, if the shecht an animal and the blood, question will be the beginning or the end, doesn't matter here. That blood then splashes. Let's say that blood would be blood that would be according to everybody. Well, that's always debated, but
not according to everybody. Let's
say the blood let's say the blood
will stay within
would be
capable
of becoming
yes, okay.
Now the blood sprays on the gourd 8 feet away. You didn't want that. You had no intention that blood should go on that gourd. You didn't want it there. So if there was no intent there, why did we even have that discussion that the gourd could be now capable of becoming tuma?
Excellent question. The issue is the following. If, for example, if you want it to rain, even if you don't want it to rain on your produce, if you want it to rain, my recollection is, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I believe that if you want it to rain, if it rains on your produce, even though you didn't want your produce to get wet, that is still considered wanting the liquid. And so it is a little bit broader. We don't just focus on did you want this liquid on this produce piece right now. That is not the question. The question is, did you want this liquid writ large to exist? And now did it touch this produce? And so, and remember that even in the situation where you didn't want the liquid initially, you didn't want it to rain and you didn't want it to go on the produce, and then it came on the produce, and then you say, you know what, actually, I do want it to be on the produce, that it also is enough. So it is not fully, I want this blood on this gourd. Yeah, maybe I didn't really want the blood on the gourd, but I did want the blood to exist. I wanted to shech the animal and kill it, and that involves blood coming out. And so as a result, that's enough. That's my understanding to make it that is enough of a desire for the blood in order for the blood to be capable of making the gourd subject to tuma. Obviously, we're talking about according to Rebbe. Okay.
Well, I
So
mean, that brings to when you mentioned the rain.
no,
I mean,
yeah.
the other thing that I had is I mean, I was going to give another example. Let's say, not rain per se. You want rain because you want the crops to grow. But let's say dew falls. You didn't want the dew. You don't want the dew. And dew, you have you have I don't know, your
Correct.
flowers,
If the dew's
whatever,
on
your food,
if,
and the food you put your steak out on the table, and you wake up in the morning, dew falls on it. You didn't want the dew at all.
correct. Then it would not be capable of that dew would not be sufficient to make that meat capable of becoming tamei. That's exactly right. You're exactly right. That is not sufficient. But again, the question is when you slaughter the animal, do you want the blood to come out? And the answer is yes. And so that therefore, even though you may not have wanted the blood on this particular gourd, that you still wanted the blood. That's the issue. So you're absolutely right. You don't probably most people don't want blood on their gourds, but if you want the blood to come, then it's just like you want the rain to come. Doesn't make a difference if the rain ends up then coming on something that you didn't really want the water to touch, but that's still going to make it capable of becoming tamei, because it's not like, did I want every aspect of it to happen? It's not that level of desire that we need to have in order for it to be capable of becoming.
So in this case with the shchita, you wanted to shech the animal and wanted the blood.
Correct.
But if I don't know, an animal is hit by a car and the blood spurts out of the animal, you didn't want that blood. You didn't want to shech that animal.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. 100%. That's a great example. Even according to Rebbe, who, let's say for the moment that he would disagree with Rebbe Shimon, and he would say that all blood is capable of making something capable of becoming susceptible to tuma. You're absolutely right. If a car hit an animal and then blood shot out onto your gourd, no question, everybody would agree that gourd is not susceptible to tuma, because you did not want the blood there. That's exactly right. Excellent, excellent point. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Awesome. Well, a great way to leave the topic. Have a great Shabbos. Looking forward to continuing our learning together. One more week, I believe, of me replacing Dove. So again, I'll be covering Monday through Friday this coming week as well. Have a great day. Have a great Shabbos.